It was the end of another school day in a quiet corner of the city, with the sun hanging low in the sky like a golden disk, casting long shadows across the pavement. The urban streets of the neighborhood buzzed with the usual afternoon noise, people chatting, music spilling from car speakers, and the distant sound of kids playing ball in the alley. Malik Johnson adjusted the straps of his backpack and slowed his pace as he walked home. He didn't mind the walk. It gave him time to think, to breathe, and today he needed the space. Basketball practice had been rough. He hadn't played as well as usual, and he knew his coach was frustrated. Malik wasn't the star player, but he had his moments, and he liked it that way. But today was different. His mind kept wandering back to a conversation he'd had earlier that week with his best friend, Jalen. "You're gonna blow it, Malik," Jalen had said, shaking his head as they sat on the bleachers after practice. "You've been stuck in this little comfort zone, man. You gotta start showing up or you're gonna fade out." Malik hated the pressure, but Jalen wasn't wrong. There was always a part of him that felt like he was on the edge of something, waiting for his moment to stand out. He just wasn't sure if he wanted to take that leap. The sound of a distant car horn broke his train of thought. He glanced around the street, which had grown quieter as the evening approached, and that's when he saw her. At first he thought she was just another new face in the neighborhood, but there was something about her that stood out. She was limping, her movements slow and hesitant. She wore a loose-fitting jacket and cargo pants, clothes that looked mismatched, but strangely purposeful. Her hair was covered by a bandana, and the way she moved, it was like she wasn't entirely comfortable in her own skin. "Hey, you all right?" Malik called out, instinctively moving toward her. The girl stopped in her tracks, her eyes flicking up to meet his. They were a striking shade of violet, a color that didn't belong to anyone in his neighborhood, or anywhere he'd ever seen, but there was no time to question it. "Yeah," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I just twisted my ankle." Malik frowned. The girl seemed to be in pain, and he couldn't help but feel a tug of empathy. She was out of place here, that much was obvious, and whatever she was going through, he didn't like seeing anyone struggle alone. "You sure? You need help?" he asked, stepping closer. She hesitated, glancing around as if unsure what to do. The streets around them were empty, the hum of the city fading into the background as they stood in a kind of fragile silence. Finally, she nodded. "I'm not used to Earth gravity," she murmured, an awkward smile tugging at her lips. "It's hard to adjust." Malik blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Earth gravity," he repeated, confused. The girl looked down at her feet, visibly uncomfortable. "Yeah, it's a long story, but I really need to rest for a bit." Malik looked down at his own feet. His sneakers were old, the soles worn from months of basketball games and street play. But they were the best pair he owned. They were more than just shoes. They were a gift from his mom, something she had saved for months to get him. He wasn't sure why, but something about the girl's vulnerability made him feel like it wasn't the shoes that mattered. He kicked them off. "You can have these," he said, holding them out. "They're not going to help your ankle, but at least you won't be walking barefoot." The girl stared at him in surprise, then down at his shoes. She seemed uncertain, almost as if she didn't know what to say. But Malik was already stepping back, pulling the shoes off and handing them to her. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Malik shrugged, trying to make light of it. "I got other shoes at home. Besides, I can't let someone limp around when they could use a pair that's actually gonna help." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes unreadable before she finally accepted them. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight he didn't quite understand. Malik nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. It wasn't just about the shoes, it was about something deeper. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, like he had done something significant, or maybe it was just the fact that he had helped someone who really needed it. Either way, he felt different now. Like this moment, however small, had changed something inside him. "Any time," Malik said, turning to leave. But just before he did, he caught a glimpse of her face. She had this odd look, a mix of gratitude and something else, something that seemed otherworldly. He shook his head, dismissing it. She was probably just another stranger trying to make her way in a city full of them. "Take care," he added over his shoulder, before walking down the street, his footsteps carrying him further from the girl, who was now standing there with his sneakers in her hands. The next morning, Malik's routine felt off. His mom had already left for work, leaving him a quick note on the kitchen counter. "Don't forget your basketball practice today." He grabbed a piece of toast and threw it into his bag, hoping he could make it through the day without much trouble. But the moment he stepped outside, something was different. The city had changed overnight, like the universe had shifted just a little bit. He wasn't sure why he felt this way. Maybe it was because he couldn't stop thinking about Naira, the girl he'd helped yesterday. Her strange violet eyes, her limp, her quiet, almost apologetic nature, and those shoes. Malik didn't care that she was an outsider. The fact that she needed help felt real, like the kind of connection you don't get every day. As he walked to school, Malik found his mind circling back to that moment, her holding his shoes, her words of thanks, and the weird, otherworldly vibe that had surrounded her. But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like he was just overthinking things. She was just a new girl. Maybe she wasn't even from around here. He'd never met anyone quite like her before, but that didn't mean anything, right? He shook his head, trying to focus on the day ahead. But as soon as he entered school, something else caught his attention. Word spread fast in his school, especially when something as weird as a new girl with strange shoes walked in. Malik hadn't even made it past the lockers before he heard the whispers. "Yo, did you see her, that alien chick? Man, she's got some serious swag. Those shoes are fresh. Where'd she get those?" Malik frowned, but he didn't respond. He knew how it worked at this school. Rumors spread like wildfire, and before long, everyone would be talking about her. It wasn't anything personal, just the way things went. But what bothered him was that she was now becoming a spectacle. He spotted Nira from across the hallway. She was standing by her locker, clearly uncomfortable with the attention she was drawing. She looked out of place, but there was something about the way she held herself that made Malik's heart ache. She wasn't used to this. No one was being rude, but their curiosity felt almost invasive. She wasn't the kind of girl who would stand out in a crowd, but here she was. Without thinking, Malik walked over to her. He wasn't sure why, but seeing her so out of her element made him want to make things right. He didn't know if he could, but he at least wanted to try. "Hey," he said softly, tapping her shoulder. Naira turned around, her face lighting up in relief when she saw him. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice calm but still carrying that strange melodic quality. "I didn't think I'd see you again." I didn't think you'd be here either," Malik said, glancing around. The students were still eyeing her, and some were outright staring. He could hear snippets of their conversations, the curiosity thick in the air. He didn't like the way it felt. "Are you okay?" Malik asked, trying to sound casual, though he could feel the weight of his words. It wasn't just about the limp anymore. It was about how she was fitting into this place, or rather, not fitting in. Naira nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "It's just different here." "People keep looking at me." Malik glanced at the group of students who were still watching her, whispering. They weren't being rude, but their fascination felt like an invasion of privacy. "Yeah, I noticed." She laughed lightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I guess I'm not really the type of person who blends in easily." Malik smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah, well, you've got some distinctive shoes. That kind of makes you stand out." Her eyes dropped to the sneakers and she bit her lip. "I know. I didn't mean to make things weird. It's just, they're comfortable." "They look good on you," Malik said, his voice steady despite the awkwardness. "I gave them to you for a reason, right? You deserve them." Naira's eyes softened, and for a moment, Malik saw something like gratitude mixed with an emotion he couldn't place. Something deeper, maybe even more vulnerable. She didn't respond immediately, but her gaze lingered on him as though searching for the right words. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "You're different." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Different? How?" You didn't hesitate when you gave me your shoes. No one here would have done that. It's... She trailed off, looking for the right words. It's not something I understand. Back home, things are different. You don't just give something without expecting something in return. Malik's curiosity grew. Where's home? He asked, his tone light, but his mind racing with questions. Naira's gaze flickered briefly before she shook her head. It's complicated. I'm still trying to figure out Earth. That caught Malik off guard. Earth? Yeah, she replied softly. I'm not from here. Malik paused, suddenly unsure of how to respond. So you're like... From another planet? His voice betrayed the disbelief that hit him, but he quickly masked it. Neera's eyes met his, and this time there was no mistaking the seriousness in her expression. Something like that. Malik didn't know what to say next. He could have asked 1,000 questions, but the truth was, he wasn't sure he was ready to hear the answers. There was something about Naira that pulled him in, something both strange and familiar. He didn't know where this would lead, but part of him wanted to find out. The following days felt like they blurred together for Malik. His routine had shifted. School was the same, but his interactions with Naira seemed to be more meaningful than ever. Everywhere he went, he heard whispers. Naira's shoes were a topic of conversation, and for some reason everyone connected Malik to her, like he was some kind of bridge between her and the school. It wasn't what he had expected when he first helped her, but now that it was happening, he didn't know how to react. Malik tried to keep his head down. He wasn't looking for attention. He didn't need it. He had enough problems on his plate with basketball and his mum's pressure for him to figure out his future. But every time he saw Naira at school, something stirred inside him, a mix of responsibility, curiosity, and a feeling that he couldn't explain. On Friday morning, Malik noticed something odd when he walked into school. There was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere, a sense of anticipation that seemed to be hanging in the air. His classmates were more engaged than usual. Heads turned when he walked down the hallway, and people who had never acknowledged him before gave him knowing nods. Malik's unease only grew. When he reached his locker, he saw Naira standing there waiting for him. She was wearing his sneakers again, the ones he had given her days before. They didn't look new. Malik could tell from the scuff marks on the sides and the frayed laces, but for some reason they looked different on her. The sneakers, once just a simple pair of basketball shoes, had become something more. "Hey," Malik said, trying to ignore the curious glances from the students passing by. "For you, still rocking those?" Naira looked down at the shoes, then back at him. "They're comfortable," she said, her voice quiet but warm. "And they fit me better than anything else I've tried." Malik wasn't sure how to take that. He wasn't expecting her to wear them every day, but something about it felt significant. These weren't just shoes to her. They were something more. Something he couldn't fully understand. Still, he gave her a small smile. "I'm glad they're working for you," he said, "but you don't have to keep wearing them, you know. I wanted to help." Naira looked at him, the gratitude in her eyes still evident. "I know," she said softly, "but they're more than just shoes now. I don't know how to explain it. I feel grounded in them." Grounded. Malik found himself thinking about that word long after their conversation ended. It was a strange thing to say, but he felt like Naira wasn't just talking about the shoes. There was something deeper there, something about her need to belong. And maybe, just maybe, he had helped her find a tiny piece of that belonging. But as he walked away to his next class, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than just a pair of shoes. It was like the moment had become something bigger, something unspoken, but too significant to ignore. It didn't take long for the rumors to escalate. By lunchtime, the whispers had turned into full-fledged conversations. Naira had become the topic of every student's attention, and for some reason, they were all tying Malik into it. "Yo, you know Malik helped that alien chick with her shoes, right?" one of the popular kids said to his friend. "I mean, that's crazy. He gave her his shoes and now she's like famous. That's some next-level stuff." Malik tried to ignore the conversation, but it was hard. The more he tried to stay out of it, the more people kept bringing it up. Naira's presence at school had quickly turned into an event. and Malik found himself right in the middle of it. At first, it felt good. His classmates were talking to him, even those who usually ignored him. They were impressed. They looked at him like he was someone to be respected. But as the day wore on, Malik felt increasingly uncomfortable. It wasn't the attention he had wanted, nor was it the kind of recognition he was used to. The respect from his classmates felt forced, like they were more interested in his connection to Naira than they were in who Malik actually was. The line between helping someone and becoming part of their story was starting to blur. When he passed by the basketball team during lunch, he overheard one of the players, Chris, speaking in hushed tones to the others. "Yo, Malik's got a connection to Naira now. He's got to be cool with her. He could probably get some clout just for being her friend." Malik clenched his jaw. He didn't care about clout. He didn't need to ride on anyone else's fame to feel important. He was just trying to do the right thing, to help someone who was struggling. He looked over at Naira, who sat alone at a table near the cafeteria windows. She wasn't talking to anyone. People were glancing at her from across the room, but no one was approaching. She looked isolated in a way that felt both familiar and distant to Malik. Malik took a deep breath and walked over to her. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from her. "You okay?" Naira glanced up, her eyes widening for a split second before she smiled softly. "Yeah. I'm just not used to all this attention. It's kind of overwhelming." Malik nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy. He understood what she meant. The attention was nice at first, but it quickly turned into something uncomfortable, something he didn't want. "Yeah, it's weird," Malik said, leaning back in his chair. "But we'll get through it." Naira smiled, her violet eyes studying him. "Thanks. For everything, really. You didn't have to give me your shoes. You didn't have to help me." Malik looked at her, realizing something. It wasn't just the shoes that had made an impact. It was the small, unexpected moments, the ones where they helped each other, that made their bond stronger. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real reason people were starting to take notice. The next morning, Malik woke up to a strange sense of unease. The usual rush of his morning routine, the smell of eggs frying in the kitchen, his mum's voice calling him to hurry up, wasn't there. The weight of the events from yesterday seemed to linger in the air like a fog, refusing to lift. He had barely slept, his mind swirling with thoughts of Naira and the way things had changed in such a short time. It felt like his life had been turned upside down. And it wasn't just about the shoes anymore. Something deeper was at play. He could feel it, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Malik made his way to the kitchen, still trying to shake off the discomfort that had settled in his chest. His mom was busy packing her bag for work, and the sound of her moving around made him feel like everything was normal again. "You still got practice today?" she asked without looking up, flipping through papers on the counter. "Yeah," Malik muttered, grabbing a granola bar and heading for the door. "I'll be fine." His mom gave him a quick, knowing glance. "You sure? You've been distracted lately." He didn't answer right away, not because he didn't want to talk, but because he wasn't sure how to explain it. How could he tell her that something as simple as giving his shoes to a girl had somehow turned into a whole thing at school? How could he explain that everything felt different now? He shook his head, brushing the thoughts aside. "I'll be good, just got stuff on my mind." She nodded, but there was concern in her eyes. Malik didn't have time to deal with it. He grabbed his backpack and left before his mum could say anything else. The walk to school was slow. Malik couldn't help but notice how different everything seemed. The streets felt quieter, the usual hum of traffic and conversations muted somehow. His head buzzed with thoughts about Naira, about the shoes, about what had happened since that simple act of kindness. It didn't feel like just a normal school day anymore. When he entered the school, it was as if the entire building had shifted. The usual hustle of students moving between classes was there, but now it felt charged, like the air itself was thicker. Malik caught sight of Naira in the hallway, and the change in the way people looked at her was unmistakable. She was standing near her locker, talking to a group of students he didn't recognize. They were laughing, but it wasn't the easy, comfortable laughter Malik was used to. It sounded forced. Naira, for her part, didn't seem uncomfortable, but there was a hesitation in her body language, something Malik picked up on right away. She was trying to fit in, but the atmosphere around her felt wrong. As he walked closer, Naira glanced over and met his gaze. Her face lit up with that same soft smile that always made Malik feel like he was doing the right thing. But today, it didn't make him feel as good. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, and not necessarily for the better. "Hey," he said as he approached her. She smiled again, but there was something guarded in her expression. "Hey, Malik," she replied, her voice still warm but now tinged with uncertainty. "How's it going?" "Good, just, usual stuff," Malik said, trying to sound casual. "How about you?" Naira shrugged. "It's different. People are staring a lot more than they were yesterday." Malik nodded. He had noticed the stares, too. The curious looks from students, the whispers that seemed to follow her wherever she went. At first it had been interesting, even a little exciting. But now it felt more like an invasion. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, feeling a surge of guilt. "I didn't think this would happen. I didn't expect you to be. Well, a spectacle." Naira looked at him with wide eyes, her lips curling into a small, understanding smile. "You didn't do anything wrong, Malik. This is just how things are. People don't know what to make of me yet." "That's the thing, though," Malik said, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't just give you my shoes because I wanted to help. I wanted to make things easier for you. But now it feels like I'm getting dragged into this whole thing." Naira took a step closer, her gaze softening. "You didn't drag anyone into anything. You did what felt right. That's what matters." Malik looked down at the floor for a moment, unsure how to respond. The guilt gnawed at him, but there was also a part of him that wasn't entirely upset by the attention. It was complicated. He wasn't sure if he was proud of how things had turned out, or if he was ashamed. "I just don't know if I'm ready for all this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't the life I wanted. I just wanted to help you." "I know," Naira said, her voice soft and reassuring. "And you did. You helped me more than anyone else could." Malik's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment the noise of the hallway faded away. It was just him and her, standing in a sea of people who didn't really understand. A bell rang, signaling the start of the next class, and the crowd of students began to move again. But before Malik could turn to leave, Naira stopped him. "Malik," she said quietly, "thank you for everything." He nodded, his chest tight. "Yeah, I've got your back no matter what." She smiled again, the kind of smile that made everything feel a little lighter, a little easier. But as Malik walked away, the weight of what was happening around him pressed down again. He didn't know where this was all going, but he felt like he was in too deep to turn back now. By the time the weekend rolled around, Malik was starting to feel the full weight of his actions. Every step he took through school was like walking through a maze of curious eyes and hushed conversations. He couldn't escape it. His association with Naira had made him a symbol of something. Something he wasn't sure he wanted to be. The day after his conversation with Naira in the hallway, things escalated quickly. It wasn't just the students whispering about her anymore. It was everyone. Teachers, janitors, even the lunch ladies. Everyone was talking about the girl who wore shoes from the popular boy Malik Johnson. Malik had known his life would change when he helped Naira. He just hadn't expected it to happen so fast or in such a dramatic way. The attention wasn't all bad. At first it felt like people were noticing him for the first time. The kids who had never looked twice at him were suddenly making small talk, complimenting him on his good deed. But the more he thought about it, the more the attention felt hollow. They weren't seeing him. They were seeing a version of him that existed because of his connection to Naira. They weren't interested in Malik Johnson, the person. They were interested in the boy who had become a part of Naira's strange story. In the cafeteria that day, Malik could feel the tension in the air as soon as he walked in. It wasn't like before when people went about their business, joking and laughing. Now every conversation seemed to stop when he entered the room, and everyone turned to look. It was like he had become the subject of a show, and everyone was waiting for the next episode. He spotted Naira sitting at the same table she had been sitting at all week, alone as usual. He could see the discomfort on her face as she glanced around the cafeteria. No one was sitting near her. It was like she had an invisible wall around her, and it wasn't the kind of wall that kept people safe. It was the kind that made everyone afraid to approach. Malik sighed and grabbed his tray, making his way to her. As he sat down, he noticed that the stares from across the room didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to intensify. "You okay?" Malik asked, setting his tray down. His voice was quiet, just enough for her to hear over the murmurs from nearby tables. Naira looked at him with a small, weary smile. "I think I'm starting to get used to it," she said. Her voice had a tinge of sarcasm, but it didn't mask the underlying sadness. She wasn't used to this attention. No one would be, and it wasn't the kind of attention anyone wanted. "You don't have to sit here alone, you know," Malik said, trying to offer a bit of comfort. "We can go sit somewhere else. It's just, they don't know how to handle you yet." She shook her head slowly, eyes falling to the tray in front of her. "It's not just that. I've never been good at fitting in. I don't belong here, Malik. It doesn't matter where I sit." The words hit Malik harder than he expected. He wasn't used to hearing her talk like this. He thought they had made a connection, a bond, but now it felt like she was pushing him away with her words. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the loneliness she was feeling, but it stung nonetheless. "You don't have to fit in," Malik said, his voice firm. "You just have to be yourself. You're already doing more than anyone else. People here don't even realize that." Naira gave him a sad smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I don't think they're looking for real. They want a story, Malik. A spectacle." Malik's stomach churned. She was right. The school wasn't interested in who she really was. They just saw the exotic, the unfamiliar, the mystery. She wasn't a person to them. She was a puzzle, something to be solved. And he hated it. He hated that he had helped create this circus, even though he never intended to. "I'm sorry," he muttered, not sure how to make it right. "I didn't mean for things to go this way. I just wanted to help." Naira's eyes softened slightly, and for a moment Malik thought she might actually say something comforting. Instead, she simply nodded. "I know you didn't," she said quietly, "but sometimes even the best intentions don't work out the way we hope." Malik fell silent, unsure of what to say next. They both sat there in the middle of the bustling cafeteria, surrounded by the noise of their peers, but both of them felt like they were in a world of their own, isolated, disconnected, trying to figure out how they fit into the chaos. Suddenly, the door to the cafeteria swung open, and a group of students entered, laughing and talking. Malik's attention shifted to them, and for a brief moment he was distracted by the noise and the energy. But when he turned back to Naira, he saw it. She was watching the group with longing, a look of deep desire on her face. She wanted to be part of it. She wanted to be seen as one of them, not as a stranger or an outsider. The reality of the situation hit him harder than ever. He had given her his shoes, but what good were shoes if the world around her still refused to accept her? Malik spent the next few days in a haze of confusion. The spotlight on him and Naira had only grown brighter, and he was starting to feel trapped by it. He didn't mind helping her, it wasn't that, but the pressure, the weight of expectations was becoming unbearable. It felt like the entire school had turned their gaze on them, expecting something more, something greater, and he wasn't sure what to give them. It wasn't just the students. Malik could feel the eyes of the teachers, the administrators, even the janitors. The attention had taken on a life of its own, like an unspoken agreement that Naira was the new thing everyone needed to figure out. Malik had never been one for attention, and now it was inescapable. When the bell rang for lunch on Friday, Malik was already dreading it. He had no idea how to face the cafeteria crowd again. As he walked in, he spotted Naira sitting alone, as usual, but this time she wasn't looking at anyone. Her head was down, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edges of the table. She looked defeated. He walked over and slid into the seat across from her. Naira didn't lift her head, but she gave a small nod when she saw him. "Hey," Malik said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of his concern. "How are you holding up?" Naira didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath like she was trying to find the words. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's harder than I thought," she admitted, her eyes still focused on the table. "I thought I could do this, you know. I thought I could blend in and just be like everyone else, but every day it's like I'm being reminded that I'm not." Malik could hear the frustration in her voice, and it hit him harder than he expected. He had seen Naira struggle with the physical aspects of being on Earth, her limp, her odd way of walking, her attempts to understand Earth gravity. But this was something deeper. This was the emotional toll of being a stranger in a world that didn't know how to accept her. "I know," Malik said quietly, leaning forward. "It's like everyone's watching you, waiting for you to mess up, or to not fit in. I can't even imagine what it's like for you." Naira finally looked up at him, her violet eyes filled with something Malik couldn't quite place. Pain, maybe, or something darker. "You don't have to imagine," she said softly. "You see it every day. You see how they look at me. It's not just the way I walk, Malik, it's the way they see me as something different. As something that doesn't belong." There was a heavy silence between them, one that felt too thick to cut through. Malik could see the rawness in her face, the vulnerability she hadn't shown before. She wasn't just an alien trying to understand Earth's customs. She was a girl trying to figure out where she fit in this strange, overwhelming place. "And maybe it's not about blending in," Malik said after a long pause. His voice was quieter now, more contemplative. "Maybe it's about owning who you are, even if it's different from everyone else." Naira gave a small, wry smile at that. "You make it sound easy." Malik shrugged. "It's not. But I've been trying to figure out who I am for a long time. And I know it's not always about what people expect of you. Sometimes it's just about doing what feels right, no matter how they look at you." Naira was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read him. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully. Finally she spoke, her voice softer. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she said, her gaze dropping again. "Every day it feels like I'm being pulled in 1,000 different directions. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I don't know who I'm supposed to be." Malik felt his heart tighten at the sadness in her voice. It was one thing to see Naira as this mysterious, otherworldly figure. It was another to see her as someone who was struggling in the same ways that he did. They might come from different places, but in that moment it felt like they shared the same weight on their shoulders. "You don't have to have it all figured out," Malik said, his tone firm but gentle. "You're here, and that's enough. You don't need to be anyone else but yourself." Naira looked up at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment it seemed like she was going to say something else, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded slowly, the smallest hint of understanding in her eyes. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. Malik wasn't sure if she truly believed him, but the small change in her demeanor made him feel like they were getting somewhere. It wasn't much, but it was something. Just then the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. The moment passed, but it left Malik with a lingering sense of connection, of knowing that Naira wasn't just some alien trying to fit into his world. She was a person, struggling just like everyone else. As he stood to leave, Naira gave him a small smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a while, Malik felt like he was starting to understand her, just a little bit more. The week seemed to drag on. Malik woke up each morning with a strange, gnawing feeling in his stomach, as though the weight of the situation was building, and he couldn't escape it. He had tried to go through his usual routines, basketball practice, schoolwork, hanging out with his friends, but everything felt off. It was as if his world had been split into two, one where he was just another teenager trying to figure things out, and one where he was entangled in something much bigger than he had signed up for. It wasn't the attention from his classmates that bothered him, though it was getting harder to ignore. It wasn't the stares, the whispers, or the sudden influx of people wanting to talk to him because of Naira. No, it was something deeper. Something about how he felt as though his life was no longer his own. It felt like everyone wanted him to be something, or someone, that he wasn't. The worst part? He didn't know how to handle it. He wasn't the type of person who liked to stand out. He liked being in the background, unnoticed. But now? Now it was like he couldn't turn back. Nira had become part of his world, and by extension, so had this new version of himself, the boy who had given his shoes to an alien. As he walked into the school building on Monday, his mind was racing with thoughts. He hadn't spoken to Nira much over the weekend, and he wasn't sure if he should. She had seemed so distant lately, and Malik wasn't sure how to approach her. She had opened up to him once, about the struggle of fitting in, but now it felt like the distance between them had grown. It was like the more they tried to connect, the harder it became to find common ground. But then, as he walked past the hallway near her locker, Malik saw something that made his heart drop into his stomach. Nira was standing there, surrounded by a group of students. Not the usual few who had been talking to her, but a group of about 5 or 6, all gathered around her. They were laughing, teasing her, and Nira, she wasn't laughing. She was standing there, her arms crossed, her head down. She looked defeated. Malik's chest tightened. This wasn't right. He had to do something. Without thinking, he walked over to the group, his heart pounding in his chest. The moment he approached, the group fell silent. They didn't even look at him, but their posture shifted, like they were all aware of his presence, like they were waiting for him to say something. "Hey, what's going on here?" Malik asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The group stared at him for a moment, as if surprised by his sudden intrusion. Then one of the boys, Jordan, looked Malik up and down. "Oh, nothing, man," he said with a grin. "Just showing Nira here how we do things around here." Malik's fists clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice steady. "That doesn't look like nothing." Jordan shrugged. "Relax, bro. We're just messing with her." Nira didn't say anything, but Malik could see the hurt in her eyes. It was clear she didn't find it funny. Malik glanced around at the other students in the group, seeing the uncomfortable shifts in their eyes. They weren't laughing anymore. They were just standing there, awkwardly, waiting for something. Malik wasn't sure what, but he knew it was his turn to act. "You all need to back off," Malik said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. He stood tall, putting himself between Nira and the group, his eyes locked on Jordan's. "She's not here for you to make fun of. You don't get to treat her like that." The group remained silent. They exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. But it was clear to Malik that something had shifted. He could feel the tension in the air. The power dynamic had shifted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he was standing his ground. Jordan finally shrugged. "All right. Whatever," he muttered, before turning and walking away with the rest of the group following behind him. Malik stood there for a moment, his chest still tight, trying to calm the rush of adrenaline. He turned to Nira, who was still standing there, her eyes wide, not sure how to react. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. Nira looked up at him, her expression unreadable for a moment before she finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that." Malik shook his head. "Yes, I did." She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with something, gratitude maybe, but also uncertainty. "I don't want you to get dragged into this because of me," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for you to protect me. You don't owe me anything." "I know," Malik said, "but I'm not doing this because I owe you anything. I'm doing it because I don't like seeing you get hurt, and because I can. I don't want you to think you have to face this on your own." Nira seemed to soften at his words, and for a moment Malik saw a flicker of something familiar in her eyes. A small, almost imperceptible shift. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Malik nodded. He didn't need any more words. In that moment, he realized that no matter what came next, he wasn't going to let her go through it alone. He wasn't going to abandon her the way everyone else had. He would stand by her, no matter the cost. And maybe, just maybe, this was where things would start to change. The days following the confrontation in the hallway were quieter, but not in the way Malik had hoped. The stares were still there and the whispers hadn't stopped, but something had shifted, both in the way the students interacted with him and in the way he felt about Nira. She was no longer just the girl with the strange shoes. She was a person, a friend even, and Malik wasn't sure when that had happened, but he knew now that he wasn't going to back out of this. He had chosen to help her, and despite everything, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. As they walked through the hallways together, it was like they were an island in the middle of a sea of noise. People still looked, still talked. But Malik didn't care anymore. He had stopped caring about how it made him look. He wasn't doing it for the attention. He was doing it because it felt right. Today, as they sat together at lunch, the quiet was palpable. The cafeteria had settled into its usual rhythm, but Malik couldn't shake the feeling that things were different now. People still looked at Naira, but now it felt more like curiosity than judgment. Some students even nodded at her, acknowledging her existence in a way they hadn't before. Malik was trying not to think too much about it. He wasn't one to overanalyze every little thing, but when he glanced over at Naira sitting across from him, she was smiling, genuinely this time. "Feeling better?" Malik asked, trying to sound casual, even though he was unsure of what to expect. He had been so focused on making sure she was okay that he hadn't considered how she might be feeling. Naira met his gaze and smiled again, her eyes lighting up in a way that made her seem more at ease. "Yeah, actually. I think I'm starting to get used to it." "Used to what?" Malik asked, raising an eyebrow. He wasn't sure if she meant the school or something deeper. She shrugged lightly. "Used to the people, the looks, the stares. I'm still not exactly fitting in, but I don't mind as much anymore, at least not as much as I did before." Malik nodded. He could understand that. He had spent years trying to fit in, trying to be someone he wasn't, just to avoid the feeling of being an outsider. But the difference was he'd never had to face the kind of alienation Naira did. She wasn't just a new kid, she was something no one had seen before. And it wasn't just her appearance, it was everything about her. The way she moved, the way she spoke, even the way she thought. It all stood out in ways that couldn't be ignored. "That's good," Malik said quietly. "You've been handling it better than I thought you would." Naira's smile faded slightly, her expression turning more thoughtful. "I don't know if I'm handling it, but I'm trying." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them eating in the comfortable quiet that had grown between them over the past few days. It was different from the tension that had filled their earlier conversations. Now there was a sense of understanding, of shared experience. Naira wasn't just the girl who had accepted his shoes. She wasn't just an alien figure trying to figure out Earth. She was Naira, the girl he had come to care about. After a few minutes, Malik broke the silence. "You know, you don't have to do this alone. I mean, I'm not going anywhere." Naira looked up at him, her expression softening. "I know. I'm starting to realize that. And I'm glad you're here." Malik smiled, the words feeling lighter now. "Well, I'm not about to leave you hanging. You're not alone in this." For a moment it seemed like Naira was going to say something else, something more, but she stopped herself, instead nodding slowly. "Thanks, Malik. I don't think I could do this without someone like you around." Malik wasn't sure what to say to that. He didn't feel like he was doing anything extraordinary. He was just being there for her, in a way that no one else had been, and somehow that made all the difference. Before either of them could say more, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Yo, Malik," Jalen called from across the cafeteria. "You coming to practice later?" Malik turned to look at his best friend, his smile slipping just a little. He had been so focused on Naira that he had almost forgotten about basketball practice. "Yeah, man, I'll be there," Malik called back. "I'll catch up with you later." Jalen raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything more, simply waving as he returned to his table. Malik glanced back at Naira, feeling a sudden sense of responsibility settling over him. Jalen was his closest friend, but Naira needed him more right now, and that wasn't something he could ignore. "Practice later?" Naira asked, her voice a little tentative, like she was unsure of how to respond. Malik shrugged. "Yeah, I'm not about to quit basketball, but I'll be there for you too. I won't disappear on you." Naira's smile returned, just a little. "Thanks. I think I might actually get used to this, you know? Having someone around who doesn't treat me like I'm some alien." "Good," Malik said, his voice steady. "Because I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." They sat there for a moment, the weight of the unspoken understanding settling between them. For the first time since Naira had arrived, Malik felt like things were starting to make sense. Maybe they didn't need to fit into the mold the world expected. Maybe, just maybe, they could carve out their own space together. The next few days felt like they were slipping out of Malik's control. Everything had been going well. He and Naira had settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind where they could talk without feeling like they had to explain themselves, where they didn't have to fight for attention. He was starting to believe that maybe things were improving, but on Thursday, Malik's whole world felt like it cracked open. It was after lunch when he noticed it. He had just finished his sandwich and was heading out of the cafeteria when he heard a familiar voice call his name. Jalen. He was standing by the door with a group of guys from the basketball team, grinning in that way Malik recognized all too well, the kind of grin that meant trouble. "Yo, Malik!" Jalen waved him over. "You gotta hear this, man." Malik approached with a hesitant smile. "What's up?" Jalen leaned in as if about to share some inside joke, but when he spoke there was an edge to his voice that made Malik freeze. "You know that Naira chick, the alien girl?" he said, loud enough for the others to hear. Malik's stomach dropped. He didn't like where this was going. "What about her?" "Man, I gotta say, I didn't know you were into that type," Jalen continued, his voice a little too loud, a little too mocking. "I mean, you really giving her your shoes and all that? What, you think she's gonna owe you something now?" The group laughed and Malik's heart sank. His first instinct was to shut it down, to walk away, but the tension in the air made him hesitate. Jalen wasn't just playing around. This was different. "I don't know, man," one of the other guys piped up. "I heard she's not even from Earth. How's that even work? Are we supposed to just act like she's normal?" Jalen laughed again, nudging the guy beside him. "Exactly, she's not one of us, but Malik, man. You're out here saving her like she's some kind of damsel in distress." Malik's chest tightened. He wanted to defend Naira, to stand up for her the way he had before, but now it felt like he was trapped in a web of awkwardness. Jalen and the guys didn't get it. They didn't understand that it wasn't about Naira being different or alien. It was about doing the right thing. But now it was all twisted. All they saw was him as some kind of hero for helping a girl who didn't belong. "You don't get it," Malik said, trying to keep his voice steady, but the words felt forced. "She's not some freak show. She's just what?" Jalen cut him off, his tone turning sharp. "A weird girl who can't even fit in. You think people aren't talking about you because of her. You're getting all this attention, but at what cost, Malik?" The group of guys went quiet for a moment, the weight of Jalen's words hanging in the air. Malik felt his stomach churn. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. He had never asked for this attention, never wanted to be the center of a school-wide spectacle. All he'd done was help someone in need, and now it was being used against him. Malik looked around at his friends. They were all waiting for him to answer, but the look in their eyes told him they weren't asking for an explanation. They were questioning him, judging him. "I'm not going to let anyone mess with her," Malik said finally, his voice tight, almost angry. "She's been through enough." Jalen smirked. "Yeah, well, if you keep it up, you're going to find yourself in the middle of a whole lot more than just school drama. People don't want to mess with that alien freak, man, and you're right there with her." The words hit Malik harder than he expected. He could feel the weight of Jalen's betrayal in his chest. Jalen, his best friend, was now mocking the very thing Malik had stood up for. And he didn't know how to fix it. "Just think about it, Malik," Jalen said, a little quieter now. "You don't have to be tied to her. You don't have to keep defending her." Malik's pulse was racing. He didn't know what to say, what to do. He wanted to scream, to tell Jalen how wrong he was. But instead he just stood there, frozen, unable to speak. Jalen slapped him on the back, too hard, as if it was a joke. "I'm just saying, man, you don't need the extra drama." Malik didn't respond. His mind was racing, his heart pounding. He turned away quickly, needing to escape, needing to get away from the whispers and the judgment. As he walked down the hall, his thoughts were a blur. He couldn't believe this was happening. Jalen had always been there for him, always had his back. But now he felt like he was losing his closest friend, and for what? For Naira? He knew he had to talk to her, had to explain, but the weight of everything that had been said, everything that had changed, felt unbearable. When he finally reached the courtyard outside, he spotted Naira sitting on one of the benches, her eyes scanning the sky as if lost in thought. She looked up when she saw him, a small, tentative smile forming on her lips. But when she saw the expression on his face, her smile faded. "Malik?" she asked, her voice quiet, unsure. "What's wrong?" He stood there for a long moment, unsure of how to begin. How could he explain everything that had just happened? How could he make her understand that it wasn't about her, but about everything else, the people, the judgment, the betrayals? "I don't know," he said finally, his voice low, almost too soft. "I don't know anymore." The following days felt like a heavy fog pressing down on Malik. It wasn't just the awkwardness between him and Jalen. It wasn't just the whispers, the stares, or the weight of the attention he'd gained from his association with Naira. It was something deeper, something that he hadn't fully processed yet. The betrayal from his best friend was harder to swallow than he had expected. He wasn't just losing Jalen, he was losing a part of himself, the part that felt safe, comfortable in his own world. Malik hadn't spoken to Jalen since that conversation, and it gnawed at him, the silence growing thicker with each passing day. He kept his distance from the basketball team, unsure of what to say, or whether he even wanted to keep pretending like everything was fine. His whole world felt fractured, like a crack in his reality that was only widening. He tried to focus on school, tried to push the feelings aside, but Naira's presence in his life had made it impossible to ignore the shifts happening around him. She had become more distant too, though it wasn't something she talked about openly. Malik noticed the small things, the way she would look at him before speaking like she was waiting for him to say something, but the words never came. It was Thursday afternoon when Malik finally caught up with Naira in the school courtyard. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the worn concrete. It was quieter than usual, and Malik could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. He walked over to where Naira was sitting, her back turned, her posture tense. She seemed lost in thought, staring at the ground. For a moment, Malik hesitated. He didn't know where to start. He had to tell her what happened with Jalen, but how? How could he explain the way everything was spiraling, how his world felt like it was slipping out of control? "Hey," Malik said, his voice softer than he intended. Naira turned slowly, as if she had been waiting for him. Her eyes met his, and there was an unreadable expression there, something too complex to decipher. "You've been avoiding me," Naira said, her voice quiet, but with a hint of frustration. Malik winced, knowing she was right. He had been pulling away, not just from her, but from everything. He had tried to pretend that things were okay, but they weren't. They never had been. "I haven't been avoiding you," he said, sitting down beside her. "I just don't know what to say." Naira raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "What happened, Malik? You're acting like everything's changed." Malik took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "It's Jalen. He's been saying stuff, talking behind my back, and I don't know how to deal with it." She frowned, her gaze sharp. "What kind of stuff? He thinks I don't know, using you, like I'm helping you just to get attention," Malik said, his voice tightening with frustration. "He doesn't understand. He doesn't get why I'm doing this." Naira didn't respond immediately. She just stared at him, the weight of his words settling in between them. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves around them. The air was cool, the setting sun casting a golden glow on everything around them. But despite the beauty of the moment, Malik felt like the ground beneath him was shaking. "You don't have to explain yourself to him," Naira said finally, her voice steady, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, especially not him." Malik sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but it's more than just Jalen. It's everything. This whole thing. It's changing everything for me. I'm losing my friends, and I don't know if I even want to play basketball anymore. I don't know what's real anymore." Naira was quiet for a long moment, her gaze flicking to the ground. Malik watched her closely, waiting for her to say something, anything to make it better. But when she spoke, her voice was soft, almost tentative. "You're not losing yourself," she said. "You're just Figuring it out. You're trying to balance who you were and who you want to be. And that's hard, I get it. I'm trying to figure that out too. Malik looked at her, surprised by her words. You get it? Neera nodded slowly. I'm not from here. I'm not like everyone else. I've had to learn to survive by blending in, by pretending to be someone I'm not. But maybe I don't have to anymore. Malik's heart tightened at the vulnerability in her voice. For the first time in days, he felt like he wasn't alone in this. He had been so wrapped up in his own confusion, his own struggle, that he had almost forgotten what Neera was going through. She wasn't just some girl he was helping out. She was a person, someone who understood what it felt like to not belong. You don't have to pretend around me, Malik said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. I just need to figure out how to make this work. With everything. Neera smiled, her expression softening. We'll figure it out together. For the first time in what felt like forever, Malik believed her. The weight of the week had begun to lift, but Malik could feel the tension still lingering. It wasn't the kind of tension that came from schoolwork or basketball practice. It was something deeper. Something about his relationship with Neera had shifted, but he couldn't put his finger on it. She had become a constant in his life, and despite all the noise around them, he had grown used to her presence. But there was still so much he didn't understand about her, about why she had come to Earth in the first place, and what her true purpose was. It was a Friday afternoon when the shift happened. Malik had been walking home from school, lost in thought, when he saw Neera waiting by the corner near his house. She was standing still, her eyes scanning the street as if she were waiting for something. When she spotted him, she waved, her usual smile lighting up her face. But there was something different in her expression today, something that caught Malik off guard. Hey, Malik greeted, feeling his usual nervous energy creeping up his spine. What's up? Neera didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her feet, as if she were deciding whether or not to say something. Malik felt the unease grow between them, the unspoken words hanging in the air like a cloud. Malik, Neera began, her voice steady but softer than usual. There's something I need to tell you. Something important. His stomach tightened. He had been waiting for this moment, for her to finally open up about her true purpose, her reason for being here. But even then, even knowing it was coming, he still wasn't prepared for it. I'm listening, Malik said, his voice low. He took a step closer, his eyes fixed on her. The wind had picked up slightly, swirling around them, as if nature itself was urging her to speak. Neera glanced around, ensuring that no one was nearby to overhear. It was as though she didn't want anyone else to know, as though this was something too significant to share with anyone but him. The secrecy only heightened Malik's sense of unease. I'm not like you, Malik, Neera finally said, her gaze meeting his. I'm not from Earth. The words hit him like a punch in the chest. He had heard her mention her origins before, but hearing it like this, seeing her face so serious, made the reality of it feel different. Malik's mind raced. He had known in the back of his mind that something wasn't quite right. But hearing her say it out loud made everything feel more surreal, more impossible. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Neera took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she had to say next. I'm from a planet called Tharos. It's far, far away from here, in a galaxy you wouldn't even be able to reach in your lifetime. Malik stood there, trying to process what she was saying. His brain was telling him that this couldn't be real, that this had to be some kind of joke. But Neera's face was too serious, her posture too rigid for it to be anything other than the truth. I came here as part of an assignment, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. We've been watching your planet for years, studying you all, trying to understand how your species works, how you interact, how you live. We're trying to integrate. Malik felt his throat tighten. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions, none of which he could voice. You're not just a regular exchange student? No, Neera said, shaking her head. I wasn't sent here to study. I was sent here to observe, to learn, to prepare for what comes next. Malik opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again when he realized he didn't even know what to ask. The idea of her being from another planet, the idea that Earth wasn't the only place with life, was too big to grasp. "I know it's a lot," Naira said, her eyes searching his face, looking for any sign of understanding. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but I had to tell you I'm not like everyone else. I'm not even from here. And I don't know what that means for us." For a long moment Malik didn't speak. He just stood there processing. His heart was racing, his thoughts in chaos. She wasn't human. She wasn't like him. But then again, she never really had been, had she? He had always known there was something different about her, something that set her apart from everyone else. And now the truth was staring him in the face. Finally, Malik spoke, his voice quieter than before. "What happens now?" Naira's expression softened, her lips curling into a sad smile. "I don't know. That's the part I'm still figuring out." The words hung in the air between them. Malik knew in that moment that things would never go back to the way they were before. This revelation had shifted everything. But even with the weight of her truth settling over him, there was something in Malik that refused to let go. Naira needed him, even if she didn't have all the answers. And maybe, just maybe, he needed her too. Malik stood there staring at Naira, his mind racing. Her confession, the truth about who she really was, about where she came from, had left him reeling. He had known there was something different about her, but hearing the words, hearing it all come out of her mouth, was a whole new level of surreal. She was from another planet. A part of him still couldn't wrap his head around it. The wind had picked up, the soft rustling of the trees around them, making the moment feel more distant, like they were in some dream. But this was no dream. This was real. Naira was real. And somehow in the midst of all this confusion, Malik realized he wasn't scared. He wasn't overwhelmed by the weight of her secret. He wasn't even sure how he felt. But there was one thing he knew for sure. He wasn't going to walk away. "What does this mean?" Malik asked, his voice low, a mix of wonder and uncertainty. Naira hesitated, her eyes drifting to the ground as if searching for the right words. "It means that I'm not who you thought I was, not just because I'm from a different planet, but because I've been lying to you, to everyone." Malik's heart dropped. The weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. She had been lying. He had always sensed there was more to her, but hearing that she had been hiding such a huge part of herself made him feel betrayed. But there was still something in the way she spoke, a vulnerability he couldn't ignore. "I didn't want to lie," she continued, her voice shaky now. I thought if I didn't tell you, if I didn't tell anyone, it would be easier. But it's only getting harder." Malik took a deep breath, trying to make sense of it all. He had trusted her, but now everything felt like a puzzle he was struggling to piece together. "Why didn't you trust me?" he asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. It was a question he had been afraid to ask, but now it was out, and he needed an answer. Naira's gaze flickered to his, her face filled with regret. "I didn't trust anyone, Malik, not because of you, but because of me. I didn't know what would happen if people knew. I didn't know what would happen to me." The air between them was heavy now, thick with unsaid words. The silence stretched out, but Malik could see the weight in her eyes, the weight of secrets, of fears she had carried with her for so long. "I get it," Malik said after a long pause. His voice was quiet but steady. "You were scared. I would have been too." He looked down, taking a moment to steady his breath. "But you don't have to keep running. You don't have to carry all of this on your own." Naira's eyes softened, though there was still a hint of uncertainty in them. "But I don't belong here, Malik. I don't know how to live in a world that isn't mine. I don't know what's coming next. And I don't know how to fix it." Malik stepped closer to her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Maybe you don't have to fix it all. Maybe you just need to be honest. With yourself, with everyone else." Naira looked up at him, her expression a mix of hope and fear. "Do you really think that will work?" Malik nodded. "I think it's the only way forward." A breeze stirred around them, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped, like the world around them had fallen silent. The weight of her secret was still there, heavy between them, but in that moment Malik felt a sense of clarity. Maybe things weren't going to be easy. Maybe they would face obstacles, challenges that neither of them could predict. But together, they could figure it out. "You're not alone, Neera," Malik said, his voice firm with certainty. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Neera smiled softly, her eyes filled with something Malik couldn't quite place, but whatever it was, it made his chest tighten. "Thank you," she whispered. Malik didn't need her to say more. The sincerity in her voice, the way she looked at him, it was enough. They didn't have all the answers, but maybe that was okay. Sometimes figuring things out wasn't about knowing everything. It was about taking the first step, trusting each other along the way, and that was the step they were taking now. "So," Malik said, trying to lighten the mood, his voice a little more playful. "What now? Do we go tell everyone you're from another planet, or—" Neera chuckled, the sound soft but genuine. "I don't know if I'm ready for that just yet." Malik smiled back. "I figured, but whenever you are, I've got your back. You know that, right?" "I do now," she replied, the faintest hint of a smile curling on her lips. As they stood there, the world seemed a little less heavy. For the first time in days, Malik felt like they could face whatever came next, together. The next week felt like a constant build-up, a storm brewing on the horizon, but Malik couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing right at the edge of something that could change everything. His conversations with Neera had become more open, more honest, but that honesty had brought a new kind of pressure. People were starting to notice the shift between them, between the way Malik was acting and the way he was being treated. It wasn't just the students anymore. Malik could feel it in the air. Teachers looked at him differently. The usual stares in the hallway had become pointed, like people were waiting for the next chapter of this strange story to unfold. It was Tuesday afternoon when the showdown finally happened. Malik had been walking with Neera between classes when they ran into the last person he had expected to confront him, Jalen. The tension had been building between them, ever since that conversation by the lockers. Malik had tried to avoid Jalen, but now there was no avoiding it. Jalen was standing in front of them, arms crossed, a look of impatience written on his face. "You think you can just walk around with her like it's all cool?" Jalen's voice was low but sharp, cutting through the noise of the hallway. Malik felt his heart rate spike. He had been waiting for this, but still wasn't prepared for how quickly things were escalating. Neera glanced at him, her expression unreadable, but he could see the unease in her eyes. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, and neither was he. Not like this. "What's your problem, Jalen?" Malik asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Jalen didn't immediately respond. He looked Neera up and down, his gaze full of judgment. My problem is you're putting yourself out there like this, man. You're just making it worse for everyone. You think she's one of us?" Malik clenched his jaw. "What does that even mean? She's just like everyone else." Jalen shook his head, his tone mocking. "No, man, she's not like everyone else. She's not even from this planet. She doesn't belong here, and neither do you if you keep hanging around with her." Malik's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You don't get it, Jalen," he said, the words coming out almost in a growl. "You don't get what it's like to be judged just for being different. She's not an alien, she's a person. And she deserves the same respect as everyone else." Jalen stepped closer, his expression hardening. "And you're just going to ignore all the other people who think she's a freak? Who think she doesn't belong here?" Malik took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger rising in him. "I'm not ignoring anyone. I'm just doing what I think is right." The hallway had grown quieter, the sounds of students bustling between classes fading into the background. It felt like they were the only two people in the world, locked in this tense standoff. Malik could feel every set of eyes on him, every whisper floating in the air. But there was no turning back now. "I don't need your approval, Jalen," Malik said, his voice firm. "I don't need anyone's approval. I'm not doing this for you or for anyone else. I'm doing it because it's the right thing." Jalen glared at him for a moment longer, his jaw clenched. Then, with a sharp exhale, he turned and walked away, muttering something under his breath that Malik couldn't catch. But as he walked off, Malik didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel proud. All he felt was the weight of everything that had just been said, the tension still hanging thick in the air. Naira stepped forward, her eyes searching his face. "You didn't have to do that." Malik looked at her, his heart pounding. "Yes, I did. I couldn't just stand there and let him talk like that." She nodded slowly, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. "I didn't want you to get caught in the middle of this, Malik. I never wanted you to—" "I'm already in the middle of it," Malik interrupted, his voice soft but resolute. "I'm not going anywhere, Naira. You're not going through this alone." There was a pause between them, a brief silence where everything seemed to slow down. Naira's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Malik saw something like relief in them. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. "I don't deserve you," Naira said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Malik shook his head, stepping closer. "You don't have to deserve it. I'm just here, that's all you need to know." Naira didn't say anything more, but the look she gave him said everything. In that moment, Malik knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. No matter what anyone else said, the days following the confrontation with Jalen felt different. Malik noticed the subtle shift in the way people looked at him and Naira. The whispers didn't stop, but there was a strange sort of respect in the way some of the students regarded them. It wasn't the mocking curiosity that had filled the halls before, but something more complex, more knowing. Some people still kept their distance, unsure of how to handle the two of them together. But there was a quiet acknowledgement of Malik's resolve, of the way he had stood up for Naira in front of everyone. Malik didn't know if it had changed everything, but it had definitely changed something. And for the first time in a while, he felt like he had made the right choice. It was Friday afternoon when Naira met him by the gate after school. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. The air had a slight chill to it, but there was a sense of calm now that hadn't been there before. Malik saw Naira standing a little further from the usual crowd, her gaze on the ground, but when she noticed him approaching, her expression softened. "Hey," Malik greeted, his voice casual but with a hint of something deeper, something he had been holding back all week. "Hey," she responded, her voice quieter than usual. "Can we talk?" Malik nodded, his heart tightening a little. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Naira shifted, looking up at him, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to gauge his thoughts, his emotions. She had been through so much, and it wasn't lost on Malik that despite everything she was still here, still trying to make sense of a world that wasn't hers. She had put up walls for so long, but they were beginning to crack, slowly, but surely. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice hesitant, "about everything, about what I told you. And I don't know. I've been holding on to this fear for so long, thinking that if I told anyone the truth, everything would fall apart, that it would be easier if I just kept pretending. But—" She paused, taking a deep breath, her eyes meeting his. "You didn't walk away. You didn't treat me like I was some alien." Malik felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He hadn't realized how much his silence, his understanding, had meant to her. He had just been doing what felt right, but seeing the way she looked at him now made him realize how much his actions had helped her. Not just in the moment, but in a deeper way. "I couldn't," he said simply, his voice steady. "You're not just someone from another planet. You're Naira. And you deserve to be treated like anyone else." Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "I don't know if I believe that, but I think I'm starting to." Malik took a step closer, his expression softening. "You don't have to believe it all at once. Just know that you're not alone in this." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The weight of their words hung in the air, filling the space between them. It wasn't just about the alien truth anymore. It was about trust, about their bond growing stronger, about understanding that no matter how different they were, they had something real between them. "I've never really had anyone like you," Naira said quietly, her gaze falling to the ground again as if embarrassed by the vulnerability in her words. "I've always felt like I was on my own, like I had to hide who I really was just to survive. Malik reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to carry that weight by yourself. Not anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Naira looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with something Malik couldn't quite place. Maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper. Whatever it was, it left a warmth in his chest, a feeling of connection he hadn't expected. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but for the first time I think I'm starting to believe that maybe I can figure it out, that we can." Malik smiled, a feeling of peace washing over him. "I don't have all the answers either, but we don't need to have everything figured out right now. We'll take it one step at a time." Naira nodded, the weight of her past seeming to ease if only for a moment. The breeze picked up again, carrying with it the sense of the city, the sounds of distant voices, and the rhythm of a normal world. One that wasn't perfect, but one that was slowly becoming theirs. As they stood there together, Malik realized something important. The true journey wasn't just about learning the truth about Naira. It was about learning to trust, to lean on each other. It was about the quiet moments, the small steps they took toward understanding. And in that moment, Malik knew that whatever the future held, whatever came next, he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Not with Naira by his side. As the days turned into weeks, things slowly began to shift, not just for Malik and Naira, but for the entire school. What started as whispers and stares had transformed into something quieter, something more respectful. The tension that had hung in the air like a storm cloud had begun to dissipate, replaced by a cautious understanding, if not full acceptance. Malik didn't know exactly when it happened, but the constant attention, the scrutiny, had faded into the background. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't as oppressive as it had been. In the midst of all this change, Malik had found a new sense of calm. Maybe it was because of the way things were with Naira, how their bond had grown, how they understood each other now more than ever. Or maybe it was because Malik had stopped trying to force himself into a mold that wasn't meant for him. He wasn't the basketball star, the popular kid, or the quiet kid in the corner. He was just Malik, someone who had made his choices, who had stood by his values, and who had no regrets. It was a Friday afternoon when they found themselves sitting together on the roof of the school, watching the sun dip below the horizon. They had discovered this spot early on, a quiet retreat where no one ever bothered them. And though it had always felt like their little secret, it was also a place where they could just be themselves, without the weight of the world on their shoulders. "I've been thinking," Malik said, his voice cutting through the comfortable silence. "Uh-oh," Naira teased, her eyes sparkling. "Thinking? That's dangerous." Malik smirked. "Very funny. But seriously, I was thinking about everything. How much has changed. How different things are now." Naira tilted her head, looking at him curiously. "In what way?" "In every way," Malik replied, leaning back on his hands. "When I first helped you, I didn't even know what I was getting into. I didn't know the weight I was carrying, the expectations, the pressure. But now it feels like it was all worth it." Naira smiled softly, her eyes softening. "It was worth it," she agreed. "I don't think either of us realized how much we needed each other, how much we'd change each other." Malik looked at her, his gaze steady. "Yeah, I used to think I was just trying to survive high school. I didn't know it could be about something more, about really being yourself, about standing up for what's right, no matter what anyone else thinks." Naira shifted slightly, her gaze falling to the city below them. "I never thought I'd find that here. I thought I was just supposed to blend in, disappear into the background. But I don't want to disappear anymore. I want to be seen for who I really am." Malik smiled, the weight of his thoughts easing. "I see you, Naira." "I always have." The words hung between them, simple but profound. Naira looked up at him, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "You don't know how much that means to me." They both fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that came only with time, with understanding. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves of the trees nearby, the distant hum of the city, and the soft whispers of the evening were the only things that filled the space. It wasn't awkward or strained, just quiet. They didn't need words to fill the gaps anymore. Malik felt something shift in the air, a moment of clarity he hadn't anticipated. He realized that the journey wasn't just about Naira finding her place on Earth. It was about him too, about discovering who he really was, what he truly believed in, and what kind of person he wanted to be. And in that moment, sitting on the roof, with Naira beside him, he knew that he was no longer just living to survive. He was living to be authentic, to embrace his choices, and to stand by them. "I think we've both changed, huh?" Malik said, his voice quiet. Naira looked over at him, her expression thoughtful. "Yeah, but maybe that's a good thing." Malik smiled. "Yeah, I think so." As the sun finally set, casting the world in soft shades of orange and pink, Malik and Naira sat together, each one of them realizing that this was just the beginning. The beginning of understanding themselves, understanding each other and embracing the unknown. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were living. And in that quiet moment, they both knew their journey wasn't over yet. It had only just begun.